German dispatches tonight the hunt for a devastating new chemical compound that could make a nuclear bomb the size of a teacup. But does it exist, or is it all a giant hoax? In tonight's dispatch, journalist Gwyn Roberts travels across 3 continents to search for the men who claim they can prove the existence of this mysterious substance. But if it does exist, who's buying it and who's selling? What sort of threat does it really pose for us all? That's Dispatches on The Trail of Red Mercury.
Moscow. And secrets are still emerging from a crumbling society. This canister is supposed to contain a mysterious substance known as RM2020, or liquid red mercury. With this, Russian scientists say a nuclear bomb can be made to fit inside a briefcase. Red mercury's formula can be found in Russian textbooks, but most Western scientists say it doesn't even exist. In our search for the truth about RM2020, we come to Moscow to meet secretly with a former nuclear chemist from the Urals. He says he is trying to sell radioactive red mercury to the outside world. He doesn't want his face to be shown because he says he's afraid of the smugglers who run the trade. We take him to a flat in central Moscow and ask him, does red mercury exist?
For Russian smugglers, it's a question of life and death. And I know people who will be killed in those smuggling processes, very serious. And when you feel danger for your life, being involved in that activity, there is no question does it exist or not. It is another question. It will be very good if that stuff would never exist.
Why does everyone deny that red mercury exists?
I think because of reasons of secrecy.
And why should they want to keep it secret?
Because I think that those latest technology, if it would be available to the third world, may be a serious danger to existing order.
The chemist gives us a photograph which he says shows a bottle of red mercury stolen from a secret production plant. There are rumored to be 3 sorts of red mercury, a toxic powder which is irradiated to form a liquid, the second form. The liquid is then implanted with a rare isotope to make the third form, RM2020. This is highly radioactive and can be used in the manufacture of nuclear weapons. We return to England to find an independent scientist who can assess what the Russian nuclear chemist told me. Dr. Frank Barnaby once worked on Britain's nuclear weapons program and subsequently spent 10 years as head of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Now a specialist on nuclear proliferation issues, Dr. Barnaby follows the red mercury story very closely.
Well, my initial reaction is that red mercury is a code name for weapons-grade material, either enriched uranium or plutonium. There are 2 reasons for that. Firstly, the cost of red mercury is about what one would expect to pay at $400 per gram for weapons-grade material. And secondly, red mercury was the code name used initially by the Russians for plutonium and highly enriched uranium, and they used that code name way back in the mid-40s.
We play a tape of our Moscow conversation with a nuclear chemist and ask Dr. Barnaby to evaluate it.
Certainly.
These uranium isotopes being introduced in the dawn of nuclear reaction are emitted a large amount of neutrons. That's why critical mass of bomb should be reduced into very small amounts. Hydrodynamics, behavior of red mercury within that small amount of time is very good for that application.
That really is very interesting.
Dr. Barnaby agrees to investigate further, and his first call is at St. Alfred's College in Winchester. He checks the chemical registers on the college database for mercury antimony oxide, the scientific name for red mercury.
No, nothing of interest there at all. Shall we try Hg2, Sp2O7? Two. Excellent.
The only Western reference, however, is in 1968, a paper written for the huge American chemical company DuPont. Why no reference since then?
Well, it suggests to me that it is probably either used for military purposes or is a very secret industrial compound, and since it's most unlikely to be the latter, I assume it has military applications.
In London, Dr. Barnaby checks the registers of chemical compounds.
They have mercury niobium oxide. They simply don't have mercury antimony oxide.
As a last resort, he checks the foreign patents registered here and discovers a vital clue. In 1988, DuPont applied for a patent with a non-nuclear application involving an oxide of antimony and mercury. Had research been secretly conducted for 20 years? And if so, what application could have been found?
Yeah, this is very interesting because it means that red mercury could be used to absorb radar and therefore used on stealth aircraft.
The patent appears to confirm that red mercury does exist and could have military uses. We travel to Central Oregon to meet the man who first made the compound for DuPont back in 1968. He's Dr. Arthur Slate, now a professor of chemistry who in his spare time breeds llamas.
Hi, Shadow. You're getting more grain than you get in a whole week.
Knowing what you know now, can this compound be used in nuclear weapons?
Certainly the mercury antimony oxide that I made could not function that way, but if one did build into the structure some actinide element, or then of course it could be a neutron emitter.
So in other words, it could be used to activate a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, I suppose it could be.
We show him a copy of the liquid red mercury specifications we obtained in Moscow.
Density of 20 is really a surprisingly high density. If that's true, then it does suggest the possibility that when it converts over to its normal structure with much lower density, that there could be considerable energy released.
It would be an explosive.
Yeah.
So not only does Dr. Slate confirm that red mercury exists, but also that in the Russian specification it could be used for nuclear weapons, a major step in our investigation. We return to Moscow with Dr. Barnaby to meet the nuclear chemist and to examine his scientific claims in detail. But he fails to turn up and telephones from the Urals to cancel meeting after meeting. Dr. Barnaby is becoming anxious.
Well, he seems to be worried because a number of people in his area have been arrested, which implies that he has some contact with criminal groups, which I find rather worrying.
The chemist turns up 5 days later.
These will be made radioactive by neutron irradiation?
No. Firstly, there is special impurities, I mean things like this, which are added in the process of treating
Yes.
of nuclear wastes, of products of nuclear reactors, and that is the source of radiation of RM.
Can I just repeat so that I can I'm sure I understand it. Well, what happens is that you get some sample which you irradiate in a reactor.
Yes.
Yes. And that produces
Of irradiated products.
radiated products
By neutrons.
are the actinides. Certainly californium is there,
Yes.
and that is the main ingredient
Yes.
in the liquid red mercury.
Yes.
So you think that really the only or the main application is in nuclear weapons?
Yes.
Yes. It seems to me that he's either himself been in the program, the Soviet nuclear weapon program, or knows designers who have, or talked to them. It's obviously a highly sophisticated technology, and it would, as he says, require access to high-powered computers and experts who know a lot about hydrodynamics and all the rest of it. I mean, all of that does make sense, certainly.
Next, we decide to ask the Russian Academy of Science about red mercury and what it is used for. We arrive unannounced after unsuccessful attempts to make an appointment.
А что вы должны здесь внутри, да?
We're looking at the question of red mercury, and we wanted the official, what is the official viewpoint of the Academy on this issue?
The personal aide to the Vice President of the Academy hands me the official response.
What are these? These are the official letters. Yes. Signed by
The Academy's position is categorical. Red mercury does not exist, cannot be produced, and in the words of the Academy, is against nature.
Thank you very much.
Заключение Института учения органической химии.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. It's very kind. Thank you. Bye.
We're introduced to a source deep inside the Kremlin who has access to ministerial intelligence. He says his identity must be concealed. We ask him, has he proof that the substance really exists?
The hardest evidence is the report prepared by the first Chief Directorate of the KGB. This report was prepared specially for Boris Yeltsin. The conclusion of this report is that there is no doubt that red mercury exists.
We ask what military applications of red mercury are listed in the KGB report.
The production of fuses of high precision for conventional bombs, the production of fuses for nuclear bombs, the production of military equipment coating to avoid radar detection, production of warheads for self-guided missiles of high precision.
Does red mercury represent a new technology?
I think it does. There is a conspiracy of silence built around red mercury in Russia and the West. It is a kind of moral illness. Those who deal in it, either on a purely financial or military basis, disgust me.
He hands us a letter from Kremlin files which says the giant Russian nuclear research center at Dubna was crucially involved with red mercury. Its authenticity is later confirmed by aides of President Yeltsin. The letter, dated December 1991, is signed by the deputy director of the Dubna Institute and addressed simply to a supplier in Ekaterinburg.
Our radiochemistry laboratory will guarantee the delivery and storage of liquid red mercury, supplied by your company to our industrial associate, ROS, in Dubna.
We travel to Dubna to investigate. Nowadays, Dubna, like many scientific centers in Russia, is desperately in need of cash. It's selling liquid helium to Britain and other countries. This particle accelerator was once a top-secret facility. Now it can be rented by Western scientists. According to the KGB report, it was used in 1969 to make the very first batch of radioactive red mercury.
And lift. Please.
Red mercury oxide was bonded with isotopes of elements such as strontium or cerium. This created a basic liquid red mercury. The KGB report says that the accelerator was then used to implant the liquid with another radioactive isotope, a transuranic actinide, even denser than uranium. This made the most potent form of liquid red mercury with potential use in nuclear weapons. This Dubna laboratory is famous for its production of rare radioactive elements and happy to show off its achievements.
The nuclear reaction can create something new, come from the one element to the other element. By chemical method, you can never do that. Then we can make a transformation of target material.
The transuranic elements marked in red were actually discovered here. Our nuclear chemist had told us that implanting these elements into red mercury makes it usable as a detonator for nuclear weapons. So we ask a Dubna official what he knows about red mercury, once again a stone wall.
Red mercury, but really I have heard about this problem only from the newspapers, but not from my activity.
The letter which took us to Dubna was addressed to a red mercury supplier in Ekaterinburg. Following the trail, we decide to travel 1,000 miles east of Moscow to a city which only a year ago was completely closed to foreigners. The town is still ringed with secret military installations. Visit local government offices to meet one of the councillors, Yevgeny Korolov. He used to work in the defense industry as a nuclear scientist. We decide this time not to ask whether red mercury exists, but to assume that it does and see if he will discuss it openly. This approach works, and he spells out the dangers posed by the new technology.
То есть вот, совершенно небольшой такой вот объем, который можно иметь. И на трансурановых элементах можно сделать такой боевой заряд, который, допустим, может уничтожить какой-нибудь авианосец там, или еще что-то, который можно транспортировать в обычном кейсе там, или какой-то небольшой гранатомет использовать и так далее. Вот, поэтому, и, в принципе, такие технологии существуют, и вот эта ситуация ядерного терроризма.
It seems the existence of red mercury is taken for granted in Ekaterinburg.
Вот что эта красная ртуть может, то есть открыть те секреты, которые сегодня еще, в общем-то, хранятся. И чтобы люди знали, то есть насколько это опасно все-таки, и насколько, и как грамотно должен быть поставлен контроль над такого рода, вот, как сказать, продукции, которая является не просто стратегической, а особо важной и особо опасной для, в общем-то, применения. Хотя она имеет, в общем-то, вторичные области применения. Это и для радиоэлектронной промышленности, для биотехнологий и так далее. И именно под этой маркой так вот и предлагается здесь ее вывозить. А на самом деле просит то, чего нужно для совершенно другого.
An Ekaterinburg businessman, afraid to be identified, tells us more about this purpose. He says a nuclear device using liquid red mercury has been tested on a remote island in the far north of Russia called Nova Zemlya. This rare footage of the island was shot by the Russian Ministry of Defense and has never been screened before. These tunnels are being constructed as a site for mini atomic explosions, designed to eliminate nuclear and chemical waste. Red mercury seems ideal for such small nuclear devices. We return to Moscow to ask the nuclear chemist to tell us more about this new nuclear technology.
On the right side you see conventional explosive materials, and on the left side you see also conventional explosive materials with the capsule of red mercury in it. In the middle you see plutonium discharge. At the moment of explosion, red mercury forms around plutonium a blanket which compresses plutonium discharge and initiates a nuclear explosion.
So what does this mean in simple layman terms?
It means that it would require a smaller amount of plutonium per nuclear bomb, and it means that the nuclear bomb could be done much smaller.
How much smaller?
Up to the size of the cup.
And how powerful would that be?
It is enough powerful to destroy a district of big city.
Does that technology now exist in Russia?
That technology is already developed in Russia.
Evidence seems to leave no doubt that red mercury exists. So we meet our Kremlin source and ask why so many people deny its existence. He tells us about a deliberate campaign to mislead the outside world by the Russian defense industry.
The Ministry of Defense, one of the main producers of red mercury, is a state within a state, and nobody can control it. They have a number of closed cities in which work thousands of scientists who are producing high technology for a new generation of armaments.
If what he says is true, its aim is to earn billions of dollars by exporting top-secret nuclear technology, thus ensuring its own survival. By denying the very existence of red mercury, this trade is protected. A fine piece of Russian logic.
They say this product can't be produced, so it can be exported. First, because it doesn't officially exist. And second, it is not a strategic product.
He says that the Academy of Science is one of several official bodies involved in this. He shows us a document from the Russian Ministry for Foreign Economic Relations. It reveals that last year the Academy was itself trying to export red mercury. The letter is addressed to the Russian Vice Premier and dated March 1992.
Conditions of export of red mercury. The annual export quota of 5 tons for 5 exporters, including the Russian Academy of Sciences Scientific Investigation Center, is still under consideration by the government.
So, despite telling us that red mercury does not exist in nature, the Academy appears to have tried to export it. Why? Our Kremlin source explains. The trade in red mercury existed in the 1980s and was only known to a select group, including Gorbachev.
Red mercury money was of course used by Gorbachev as a financial support for his economic reform.
The coup attempt against Gorbachev in 1991 brings a new twist to the story.
When the Soviet Empire and the communist regime collapsed, many of the documents filed in the Central Committee headquarters and the Ministry of Defense about the red mercury business were destroyed.
Our Kremlin source shows us one very important letter which survives. It confirms that Gorbachev's regime knew about the trade.
To the Soviet Council of Ministers from Dalvent, Moscow. Contract signed with Massandra Liechtenstein for $48 million. Money for the first 300 kilos of semi-finished product of liquid red mercury was transferred to Vnesh Econombank.
After the fall of Gorbachev, sales continued, but no longer under government control. Our contact names one Russian businessman who tried to benefit from these unregulated sales. He shows us a circular letter from the Licenzentor group addressed to red mercury suppliers asking for samples. In it, the group claims to have government permission to export 5,000 kilos of red mercury in 1992. The Yeltsin administration denies giving such permission. So, we decide to visit the man who signed the circular at his office in central Moscow. Last year, Vyacheslav Khrushchev sought formal approval for red mercury exports from the International Atomic Energy Authorities in Vienna, but he was turned down. He now tells us red mercury doesn't exist.
Когда мы ехали в Вену, мы на 100% были уже убеждены, что этого продукта не существует в природе. Но всегда, знаете, лучше быть убежденным на 110%. И нам хотелось поставить именно вот эту последнюю точку над «и».
There were many businessmen like Khrushchev desperate to establish export channels for red mercury. The Yeltsin administration was unaware of the trade until they were flooded with applications for export licenses. President Yeltsin decided to mount his own investigation and appointed a leading member of his administration to carry it out. Alexander Kryczewski was the man chosen by the new government to prepare the dossier on red mercury. He invites us home for tea to tell us what he found out. He believes that in the past the communists salted away the proceeds from red mercury exports in foreign bank accounts.
Объем этот, очевидно, носит характер свыше нескольких миллиардов долларов в год, так как по ценам, существующим, точнее, можно сказать, упоминаемым в прессе и в предложениях о сделке, которые поступали в правительство от различных, в том числе иностранных фирм, начинались цены с уровня 250 тысяч долларов за килограмм.
Have certain ministries in Moscow been involved in a cover-up?
Это, наверное, можно предполагать как позицию попытаться сохранить государство в государстве. Я имею в виду военно-промышленный комплекс. который пытался ранее и сейчас старается не допустить к себе какие-то вневедомственные проверки, попытаться, чтобы было взято действительно под государственный контроль.
It's spring in Moscow. Until now, the Russian public has heard very little about red mercury, but things are about to change. On March 13th this year, a Moscow newspaper publishes a leaked letter from the head of the Special Commission on the Protection of Russia's Economic Interests. This is the government body which regulates the export of nuclear materials, and the letter lists the nuclear applications of red mercury.
Production of detonators for nuclear weapons, activation of nuclear reactors, production of anti-radar coating for military equipment.
We go to the Russian parliament and meet the man who leaked the letter to the press. Gennady Sayenko on the left is a Communist Party official of long standing who is a member of the Parliamentary Commission investigating red mercury. The letter, he says, is genuine, and he shows me a copy. It says that foreign dealers are showing considerable interest in buying red mercury. We ask him to tell us what his commission has discovered.
Экспертные оценки Комитета по защите экономических интересов при президенте с полной выкладкой предприятий, которые производят красную ртуть или используют красную ртуть. Точное наименование основных направлений его использования. Высказываются разного рода предосторожности на предмет обращения с этим веществом или с идеей этой. Есть совершенно секретные в одном единственном экземпляре документы, которые уже расписали полную технологию, значит, от получения, транспортировки, вывозу этого вещества.
Sayenko says the commission discovered that red mercury was being traded in the 1980s and was formally listed as a valuable strategic material. This confirms what our Kremlin source had already told us. After leaving Sayenko, we are filming outside the parliament chamber when, to our amazement, we hear Vice President Rutskoy accuse the Yeltsin administration of massive corruption in its handling of the red mercury trade.
Возникает вопрос, если красная ртуть существует или может существовать в природе в виде какого-то физического вещества, то это, соответственно, ценнейшее стратегическое сырье. Непонятно также, на кого работают наши ведущие академики, химики, другие не менее квалифицированные и ответственные люди в Министерстве безопасности и Главном разведуправлении, которые утверждают, что красной ртути нет и не может быть, что с ней ничего не может быть связано. Но эта история тянется уже второй год. Если внимательно изучить документы, я думаю, этим займется прокуратура, то это чистейшей воды афера.
Rutskoy was provoked by the discovery of this document dated February 1992, in which Yeltsin secretly awards one company the sole right to sell the substance abroad. The company, Promocology, is headed by Oleg Sadikov. Although nervous about being singled out in Parliament, he agrees to talk to me. He believes Russia could officially earn billions of dollars, currently lost in backdoor sales, through the export of such materials. And he says that's why President Yeltsin wants to legalize their sale under the tight control of one company. Yeltsin's political enemies have other ideas.
Заинтересованы в том, чтобы легальные поставки не начались, чтобы наша возможность производства данного продукта не была реализована. Тогда они остаются монополистами на черном рынке данного продукта и еще выигрывают политическую схватку, так сказать, поставив президента в очень такое, будем говорить, неловкое положение.
Sadikov shows us some laser crystals made using red mercury. The same technology, he says, could be used for solar batteries or even jewelry. We ask Sadikov, can red mercury be used as a plutonium substitute? He refuses to answer and interrupts the interview.
Не для записи я отвечу.
Does he want me to turn it off?
Later, off-camera, Sadikov makes the astonishing claim that a weapon the size of a ballpoint pen cap is theoretically possible. He says 80 such weapons spread across Moscow would obliterate the city. He finally agrees to show us some of the materials causing the furore. Our meeting is interrupted when colleagues deliver samples of red mercury variants in a plastic shopping bag and an empty tin. We can hear they're worried by his decision to talk to us, but Sadikov tells them the Kremlin has given him permission.
Чуть-чуть срок больше, он еще менее устойчивым становится.
Because only this material is rather fresh. When old, it becomes very stable.
Так. Ну и вот это, я бы его тоже...
He shows us what he says is the raw material for RM 2020, though we can't test it or take it away. This powder would cost us $100,000 a kilo.
Этот материал в жидкой форме является слабо радиоактивным. Ну, в частности, голой рукой вот такое количество, это опасно показывать. So, this material is mercury in red color and in polymeric form, crystallic form. This material not common mercury. 2020 another material. For production of 2020, I need some quantity of this material.
Could you tell us how it's made?
No. No.
So red mercury is a new strategic material, and it looks as if the Russian defense industry is trying to export it. But who are the buyers? We go back to our Kremlin source to find out.
American, British, French and German corporations have been buying it, all of them involved in work on nuclear, missile or stealth technology.
Does the report mention any other countries that want to buy red mercury?
Iraq, Libya, Israel and South Africa. All these countries are keen to have nuclear weapons. Saddam Hussein was one of those eager to buy red mercury. Just before the Gulf War, a representative of Iraq was looking for specialists and offering up to $1 million for 1 kilo of red mercury. This is military attaché office of Libyan embassy. In this building, high representatives of Libya arranged with Soviet colleagues shipment of red mercury from Moscow to Tripoli. All the shipments were arranged through the diplomatic freight.
We revisit Oleg Sadikov in central Moscow to find out who he is selling red mercury to. When we meet him, he is tense and his friends are telling him not to talk to us.
А? Да я все время выступаю теперь. В каком плане-то она может воспользоваться? А как они могут сыграть? Господи, я сейчас на президента играю. Спасибо.
Sadikov tells us that his life may be at risk and that he now wants to leave the country.
Политического убежища в Штатах, значит, поскольку травля против нас преследует только политические цели. Значит, если здесь настолько, будем говорить, ситуация не контролируется нормальными государственными структурами, если у нас мафия может безнаказанно клеветать, значит, срывать крупнейшую деятельность в интересах государства, то я в интересах той же России лучше буду работать в Штатах и вывезу с собой, значит, ведущих специалистов и эти технологии. 3-го года
We're still trying to find out about his buyers and catch a glimpse of a contract on his desk. It's with an American company called API, but he's worried about showing it to us. We'd seen numerous proposals offering to buy red mercury, but this was the first signed contract in the entire investigation. Not only that, it seems to be an enormous deal. The price per kilogram is $290,000, and API is to buy 84 tons over 3 years. In effect, what is possibly at stake for the Russian economy is billions of dollars. The question is, can the deal be genuine? To prove his product is real, he shows us an analysis from a Swiss laboratory. Sadikov tells us the material is radioactive and will be dispatched shortly from a military airbase in Ekaterinburg.
То есть они должны в адрес Imperial банка направить требования перечисления этих денег. Получатель концерн промысловой.
According to the contract, the buyers, API, have business addresses throughout North America. We track down one in New York first. The address in the Rockefeller Center turns out to be no more than a numbered postbox. We go on to Los Angeles to find API's head office. It's on Sepulveda Boulevard, and we discover the company's full name is Automotive Products International. We telephone API chairman Jesus Godinez, and he agrees to talk to us at a different business address. The question is, how can this man set up a deal involving billions of dollars?
First of all, the type of financing that would be behind this is countries. Second of all, regardless of what the deal is worth, there's only so much they can produce at a time. And whatever the production is, there's a production schedule. And based on the production schedule is the type of funds that would be put in place to be able to purchase these commodities. And you'd roll it over, basically.
But you are representing countries buying this material.
We are representing attorneys, and how can I put it, corporate executives basically at this point that are in a position to represent companies. We have...
Companies or countries?
Companies and countries.
Can you name any countries?
At this moment I cannot, no.
How many countries are we talking about?
At liberty right now I can say 2.
Why should countries use the owner of a car accessory shop as a broker? Mr. Godinez would only say that he deals with a company in the Midwest with contacts into the aerospace industry. Is it true red mercury can be used in the manufacture of a new type of nuclear weapon?
That I don't know anything about myself. These type of areas we are not pursuing. The clients that we have, as we call them end users basically, are dealing more in the electro-technology type markets, in the petroleum markets. We will not and do not pursue anything that has to do with weaponry.
How can you ensure that the likes of Saddam Hussein are not trying to buy from you?
Well, first of all, our attorneys are pursuing right now the type of regulatory authorities in Europe that will control, and we will be, I guess, in a liability stage to let them know exactly where this commodity is going. It's not like somebody calls you up and walks into your office and says, gee, I want to buy X amount of this commodity. These people are scrutinized very heavily. We will know who we are dealing with. Right now, at this moment, the ones that we have known for the past 2.5 years. We know who they are.
Is it RM 2020 you're buying from Oleg Satikov?
No, not necessarily. What we are buying is a polymer product. It could be the 2020 version. It could be what we are calling a modification A or modification C. It's basically a polymer product.
But as I understand it, this material was developed and produced in military plants.
That is our understanding also.
Jesus Godinez is the first person to tell us openly that he's buying red mercury. He says that the hub of the trade is in Zurich and that lawyers acting for one of the main end users are based there. It's convenient because the secrecy laws governing Swiss banking allows money to change hands discreetly. We hear that several Swiss laboratories have been commissioned to analyze samples for prospective buyers looking for RM 2020. Herr Lutz, who runs the Morge laboratory, is analyzing a sample of red mercury powder for one of his many clients.
We have some mass spectra. Those customers arrive normally after appointment by phone. They like sometimes to arrive at night or at the weekend, and quite a lot of them don't like very much the sunshine.
The lab that really interests us, though, is this one, which analyzed one of Sadikov's red mercury samples. We discover that the Spitz laboratory is a top-secret military complex and the Swiss equivalent of Britain's chemical defense establishment at Porton Down. They refused to be interviewed but confirmed they did carry out the analysis. Most of the deals we find out about mention the customs-free zone at Zurich Airport. One customs document in our possession says that no tariffs will be imposed on liquid red mercury exports from Switzerland. From here, such consignments can be exported anywhere in the world. During our investigation, we came across this order. It was for 50 kilograms of RM 2020 and was from a British company. As with all the requests we've seen, BM Trading wanted liquid red mercury delivered to Zurich Airport. BM Trading now operates from this street in London's Soho district. They confirmed they were indeed the purchase company which sent the letter and admitted they'd been trying to obtain RM 2020 samples via Zurich. They said the transaction was never completed. Prospective buyers and sellers are unregulated because international agencies publicly deny red mercury exists. In Oregon, Professor Slate told us that Los Alamos, America's top nuclear weapons research lab, had dismissed the red mercury threat a year ago. Now things have changed.
So I simply asked a colleague at the Oregon State University who is a nuclear chemist and does know people at Los Alamos who work in the area of nuclear weapons, and he did ask someone at Los Alamos what they knew about red mercury, and was told that that was a subject he couldn't discuss. So.
It was a secret.
The implication was that it was a secret, yeah.
Back in Russia, there is mounting concern that while the whole issue is kept secret, the problems can only escalate. Alexander Khrushchevsky, who prepared the Red Mercury report for President Yeltsin, views the future with dismay.
Но если мы не будем думать о том, что необходимо обеспечить безопасность в самом начале появления этой проблемы, это может просто иметь Чернобыль в другом масштабе.
Разве не те, кто власовский флаг подняли, против современного нашего воевали?
Once a cherished military secret, red mercury is now for sale, and the West ignores the dangers at its peril.
Red mercury affair is a kind of matryoshka. When you open the political side, you can find inside economics. When you open the economics matryoshka, you can find the moral matryoshka. And when you open the moral side of this doll, you can see military, strategic, and so on and so on. There is no doubt that inside our matryoshka is hidden something terrible for world security.